I like to tell people I was born on third base. Just had the best childhood, very stable family life. Born and raised here in Huntsville, Alabama. My dad's an engineer as well. Worked out on the Arsenal, served in the Army. His father, same thing. Again, born and raised here in Huntsville all through high school, then went to David Lipscomb College in Nashville, Tennessee, and then Auburn for my first engineering degree, and then UAH for graduate school.
What drove you to engineering? Was it just the lineage?
I think so. Looking back on it, it must be something genetic because from a young age, I was always taking apart my bicycle or something like that, putting it back together, and just fascinated by what makes things work.
What brought you to aviation engineering?
Yeah, I tell you, just a fascination with military aircraft, with missiles, the aerodynamics, and I have to say, I like anything that's fast. I'm kind of a speed junkie.
Yeah.
And so the aerodynamics associated with high-speed missiles and aircraft has always fascinated me.
Did you get to spend any time on the base with your dad?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. When I was working out there as a co-op, I had more bosses than you can imagine. I didn't work for any of them, but they were just my bosses because
Sure.
they were family members. My dad, my uncle, my brother, they were all working out there. So I couldn't go very far without having a boss somewhere.
Do you have any memories of those early days, of Redstone when you were out there?
Oh, yeah. So my first job was to go work with, now her name is Dr. Susie Young. At the time, she was not much older than I was, and I was a co-op at Auburn University, and she was in charge of something called unmanned ground robotics. And I thought, man, what is that? Turned out to be the coolest thing in the world. We were test driving four-wheelers and all kinds of different platforms to see what would make a good unmanned ground vehicle. We hear a lot about unmanned air vehicles, but the Army was also looking for ground vehicles. And my first quarter working with Dr. Susie Young, test driving these vehicles and mounting all kinds of weapons to them, and that was so much fun. I couldn't believe I was getting paid to do that. And
what time period was this?
that was 1984.
Okay. The reason I asked that is just because we only recently kind of are really hearing about drones, in just like the last decade or so. And so it's interesting that they were already looking into those things that long ago.
Yep. Yeah. And it was a it was a political and technical challenge to get people comfortable with, wow, you've got an armed unmanned vehicle, and what happens, and how do you secure it? What if someone else gets their hands on it? All those sort of things. I think that's probably what slowed down the development more so than the technical capability that we had.
So when you graduated from college and you had your degrees, where did you begin your engineering career?
So after co-oping with Auburn, they had paid for the Army paid for my undergraduate degree. And so when I graduated, I owed them either some money or some time in service, and I certainly didn't have any money. And so that decision became pretty easy. So in the spring of 1988, I came to work for Redstone Arsenal in the U.S. Army Missile Command, and again, continued my work with Dr. Susie Young in robotics and all kinds of other structural and dynamic assignments.
When you finished your time there and you entered the civilian world, what was your first adventure there?
After 15 years, the government offered an early out, and so I took that and went to work for a local contractor. And actually, that's where I really fell in love with the business of the business and the business of defense contracting and aerospace. And it's like, wow, I'd only seen the technical side and, somewhat the political side, but wow, the business side of engineering, that's really what gets me up in the morning, just solving problems and applying resources to find solutions. That just captivated me. And so then I said, hey, I got to go start my own company.
How did you do that? Tell me how you started it, and what was your first company that you started?
Okay. So started a company called Summit Research in 2001. My dad had recently retired, and so he's just great. We work together on all kinds of things, and so he helped me get started, kind of doing some of the background work, getting the infrastructure in place. So when it came time for me to leave, I told my boss, I said, "Hey, I'm leaving. I'm not taking any company pencils or anything like that with me, but I'm just going to go and give this a try on my own." So that was really a lot of fun to get to work with my dad there for the first few years of that company.
And what did they do? Was it continuing just the engineering, or?
Yeah, exactly. So again, we tried to, as a small company, tried to migrate towards technologies that require some speed and agility to position ourselves as a company to take advantage of, hey, here's what we see. These are the technologies and problems we see coming down the road. So we really focused on just advanced technologies to solve some pretty difficult problems.
Yeah, we all know that if anyone listening who's worked in a corporate environment knows those large ships turn slow.
Yes, sir.
And so being a small company, I imagine you had a lot of flexibility to be able to just change direction and follow whatever road was most beneficial to you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, speed and agility is just so important. I say all the time, if you're 7 feet tall, play basketball. If you're 3 feet tall, be a gymnast or a horse jockey, but don't try to do something you're not good at. We didn't have the big company muscle to do that, but we also didn't have the bureaucracy.
Right.
I'm a big fan corporately of decentralizing decision making.
Yeah.
As long as everyone centralizes the situational awareness, then we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
But try to give the decision making to the person who's closest to the problem. I'm a big fan of what Steve Jobs said. Why in the world would you hire smart people and then give them a bunch of rules?
Right.
Just let them go do their thing. And, then I would always follow that up with, if you're going to fail, try to fail quickly.
Yeah.
So we can learn and then move on to the next thing. But at least we know that didn't work, and so we can go try something else.
Can you tell us something about a project that you worked on that you're proud of from that time period? Or?
Yes, the Army was looking for a variant of a Hellfire missile and a TOW missile. Both of those technologies were developed in the 70s, and so they were looking for some combination capability that could take out tanks, aircraft, could be shot from the ground, could be shot from the air. And so that was a great project, and we made a lot of progress there. We also developed a weapon system, or assisted in the development of a weapon system called non-line of sight. It's a vertically launched missile that just kind of came out of a box and then could go anywhere. The thing that was cool about that box is, we could make it look like whatever. It could look like an air conditioner sitting on top of a building. It could look like a container sitting on a dock somewhere. So that was a fascinating, typically you have to aim a missile in a certain direction. This one could, and that's expensive. It's a big launcher, all kinds of technology associated with that, and it's restrictive. It only has so many so much range and where it can aim. With this vertically launched system, it's really 360 degrees where it could go. So that was a great project as well.
And it was sneaky.
It's sneaky, yeah. It was clever.
That's very cool. So at some point, did you leave that company, or it was bought by, you sold it?
Yes, sir. After about 3 years, I sold that company to Digital Fusion, which was a publicly traded company that was primarily involved in internet service provider type of capabilities, but they wanted to get into the aerospace and defense world. And so, what is there a connection there that maybe that I don't see as just a not engineer person? They wanted to come to Redstone Arsenal, and instead of building a company from scratch, they wanted to buy a company that was young, that could they could help grow and shape and this, that, and the other. So I guess I was a pretty good target. Of course, I told them, I said, well, it's not for sale. And of course they said, yeah, it is. And
there's always a number.
Yeah, exactly. So, so sold the company to Digital Fusion. Again, that was publicly traded company. So my employees got a free IPO out of that deal.
Nice.
And then served as the president of Digital Fusion for a number of years.
Okay. And at some point, that company continued to grow, and you told me before we started that it got a little too big for what you were enjoying.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great company, and it became a nice acquisition target for Kratos Defense, and so they came in and bought Digital Fusion, and then so I worked for Kratos here in Huntsville for several years as well. Also another large publicly traded company.
But you decided to go back and start over.
Yeah, I tell you, my roots are just in small business. Again, I think I like the maneuverability and the speed and agility that a small business provides.
Right.
And yeah, that just kind of suits my personality. I like that kind of family feel. Right. And so I started a company after that, after clearing it with the folks at Kratos, and so started another small business.
And that company's called i3.
Yes, sir.
And were they kind of in the same industry?
Yeah, it kind of went back to our roots. We got involved in hypersonic weapons, drones. As you mentioned, they were becoming more popular now. Right. We did a good bit of international flight training. Foreign countries would buy U.S. fighter jets, and then they would ask the United States for, how do we get training? And they say, well, you actually bought that from Boeing or Lockheed or somebody. Right. You didn't buy that from the United States government. And the Air Force and other folks, their classrooms were already full.
Right.
And so we saw an opportunity for us to go and provide that pilot training for these countries who were buying, for instance, Saudi Arabia buying these really nice F-15s.
Yeah.
But, it's kind of like a 16-year-old kid with a brand new car in the driveway, doesn't know how to fly it, Yeah. And so we would go to all over the Middle East training folks, and then we actually built a training center in Roswell, New Mexico, of all things, and trained pilots from all over the world.
Wow. And at some point then you chose to depart that.
Yeah, we had developed for hypersonic weapon systems probably the limiting factor, the most critical technology. I guess it's easy for me to say because it's what we're working on. One of the most critical technologies is the thermal protection system on that missile. It gets extremely hot at high speeds, and within the Earth's atmosphere, it creates a lot of friction on the surface. And to be able to manage that heat, we had to develop some really clever thermal protection systems, which we did, and we're very successful with that. And but it was honestly, it was too big of a problem for us to handle as a small company. It
Sure.
needed to be in the hands of a big OEM or prime contractor that could take that to the next level of production.
Right. You sold part of that company, right?
Yes, sir. Sold the hypersonic division to Lockheed Martin in 2020. Formed an organization called HEAT, Hypersonic Engineering Aerothermal Technologies. And then they have gone and, again, figured out all the producibility issues associated with that. Then the next year, we sold the other remaining parts of the company to i3 employees in an ESOP. And so that was 2021.
Okay. Was that kind of your retirement moment?
Yes. Okay. After doing that, I thought, I want to retire, and then I had some other interests that I wanted to pursue, and then so that allowed me to kind of devote my time to these new things that I'm doing.
Right. Well, before we get into some of the new things you're doing, let's delve a little bit into some history here, because this is the Year of Aviation, and you have already mentioned briefly that you have a lot of history in your lineage, but you also even your uncle has written a book about the air and space history here in Huntsville.
Yes. So my uncle Gary wrote this Huntsville Air and Space history. It is a fantastic book where he chronicles everything from our family's connection to early aviation in the early 1900s all the way through. He was an engineer with NASA at Marshall Space Flight Center, worked on space station, space shuttle, all kinds of programs. Wow. He's actually still a docent here for the Space and Rocket Center, and loves to give tours, and he is a wealth of information.
Wow. I know that you just mentioned that in the early 1900s that your family was involved in early aeronautics and aerospace. So let us know some of that.
Okay. So my great-great-grandfather, so that's my paternal grandmother's grandfather, William Lafayette Quick, or as he was known, Big Pap Quick, lived here only 15 miles from where we are today, between Hazel Green and Newmarket, and a little place called Sulphur Springs. And he was just a genius. And so, again, this is before the Wright brothers. This is 1900. He started building an airplane. He had some delays waiting on an engine, a Ford Model T engine. And so the Wright brothers flew first. But then in 1908, he flew the first monoplane in the country, first airplane in Alabama. But again, the first monoplane that was ever built and flown in the country, again, in 1908, so just a couple of years after the Wright brothers. And it was built and flown here, again, 15 miles from the Space and Rocket Center.
So what is a monoplane, and how is it different from what the Wright brothers did?
Good question. So the Wright brothers built a biplane. In other words, it had two wings, increased lift. We like to say that the plane that Big Pap built was more like modern aircraft in the sense that it had a single wing, so that's the name monoplane. It had a tractor prop, a propeller in the front that pulled the plane, as opposed to a pusher prop in the back. The pilot was seated. The engine was mounted to the fuselage, and one of the most clever things that Big Pap figured out was a way to flex the wings for pitch control. In other words, they would warp because they were made out of canvas and some kind of flexible wood. Mm-hmm. So that was another really fascinating, the control that he saw. And then also a three-point landing gear.
Wow.
Was, somewhat ahead of its time. And it also, one other point, it could take off on its own power as opposed to need to be launched off of a rail.
Right.
So, it's just fascinating how many design cues he came up with that are still employed today in modern aircraft.
So I'm going to ask a non-engineer question just out of curiosity here. Why is the pull engine better than the push engine?
Well, that's a great question. We have some drones now that are pushers, and we have some light aircraft that are pushers. So pretty much most any, modern aircraft you would be around today, a Cessna or Piper, they're all the propeller's in the front, and it pulls the aircraft through the air as opposed to pushing it. Probably has to do with stability, aerodynamic stability. But yeah, he was ahead of his time when. And the fascinating thing to me is he was a naturalist. He loved biology. He loved animals. So he would pay the kids around his house to go collect dragonflies and other flying insects and bats even, because he was fascinated with how their wings attached to the fuselage.
Right.
And so when you look at the plane, it has a lot of natural elements to it. Again, I mentioned the wings. They're kind of these ribbed structures with a lightweight canvas. It looks just like a bat wing. And so his ability to translate nature into something mechanical was really fascinating.
Now, this plane, it's here at the Rocket Center, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hanging in the rotunda of the Davidson Center here at the Space and Rocket Center. It's a work of art. It's really fascinating. One other thing, the folks here at UAH, Dr. Brian Landry, who's a professor of aerospace engineering, wanted to see if that airplane would actually fly. We know it flew. It didn't fly long,
right,
or many times, but he just wanted to see aerodynamically, is this really a viable design? So they measured everything, built a finite element model of it, kind of put it in the wind tunnel digitally, and yeah, it flew.
Wow.
And they kind of gave the stamp of approval that, yeah, that's a viable design.
1908.
Yeah, 1908. Yeah.
Goodness. Well, you mentioned Cessna, so there's a quick connection with that as well.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So Big Pap had a son-in-law named T.T. Maroney, and he made his way to Houston and actually gave Clyde Cessna, who lived in Houston, gave him his first ride in an aircraft, and then they participated in a cross-country race, and they won. Clyde Cessna was the passenger, and they won that race, and then I think that gave Clyde Cessna the bug, and obviously Cessna, I think, is the most prolific aircraft in the world, still to this day. And so that was a real interesting connection. And then one other connection that T.T. Maroney, Big Pap's son-in-law, had was with Bill Boeing, which was fascinating. T.T. Maroney had moved out to Montana and the Washington State area. There was a county fair going on, and T.T. Maroney would give people rides and would do stunts and acrobatics and those kind of things. Bill Boeing was 19 years old, worked at a lumber factory, wanted to go for a ride, never seen an airplane, wanted to go for a ride. T.T. Maroney had an old Curtiss, an English Curtiss airplane. Bill Boeing went on his first ride, landed. His buddy said, "Hey, what did you think about that?" He said, "That's pretty cool, but I could build a better airplane than that." And it gave him the bug, and the rest is history.
Wow. So Boeing and Cessna both begin with the Quick family.
It's fascinating. And then when you just bring everything full circle, Boeing Space Station and all of everything that NASA is doing with Boeing and defense is doing with Boeing, it's just, you never know how small of an action can have big impact. And so, be careful and mindful what you do every day and those small actions. And I've actually been to Washington to the Boeing Museum and got to read the Boeing history annals, and they reference
really
the T.T. Maroney and that's how Bill Boeing got started. And again, it was a really interesting validation for the family. Yeah. I think one of the things that just fascinates me is how he constructed this. So again, in this little place called Sulphur Springs, the Flint River runs in that area, and he cut a race. In other words, diverted some of the water and then built a dam and had about a 10-foot tall head, kind of essentially like a hydroelectric dam. And the waterfall spun a turbine which was connected to a bunch of leather straps that drove lathes and other kinds of machinery inside of his shop. He also later turned that into electrical supply for that part of North Alabama.
Wow.
But inside that shop, we still have some of the artifacts, the stones and renderings and notes and all that. But yeah, just his vision to go from seeing these birds and insects fly to, hey, let me build something mechanical. And it's one thing to design it, but it's another thing to actually fabricate something that works. Large, probably 6 or 8 foot diameter prop, all hand carved,
right?
From a log, and it's just absolutely fascinating. So that property is still owned by the family out on Walker Lane. So that's a real treasure. So again, as an engineer, the fabrication and the production of that aircraft was just as impressive as the design.
Yeah. When your uncle wrote this book, was there anything in there that surprised you to learn?
Big Pap, William Lafayette Quick, had 10 children, and all of them became pilots.
Really?
Yes. One of the girls, there were 7 boys and 3 girls, one of the girls, Sadie, actually, without her parents' permission, became a wing walker.
Oh, wow.
Do you remember in the acrobat days and someone would get out of the plane and walk on the wing? Yeah, so I'm not sure we're all right in the head, but she became pretty famous for doing that.
Wow.
They did a lot of barnstorming events and acrobatics, and just went all over the country showing off this new airplane. Again, because it was a monoplane, it was very maneuverable. And relatively fast. I remember reading there's a newspaper article that was printed that said this can go 1 mile in a minute.
Wow.
Which is 60 miles in an hour.
Right.
So in today's concept of speed, that may not be very fast, but for something traveling 60 miles an hour in the air, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
They were also instrumental. We have the Huntsville International Airport here that we use now. There's what we refer to as the old airport down on South Parkway, the Parkway and Airport Road. My grandmother actually christened an aircraft that was the first aircraft that was flown in there. Again, a Boeing 727 aircraft, and it was parked right next to Big Pap's monoplane there for that day. Some great photos in my uncle's book. But there was actually an airfield prior to that. It was in what's called Mayfair Park, close to Whitesburg Drive and Drake and Bob Wallace. And it was just a big field, and they asked for permission to clear the field. And so that was a grass landing strip that was used. During the early days, there were a bunch of military planes that were trying to make their way down to, I believe it was Birmingham. The weather got bad, and so they had to divert and come back and land in Huntsville. They have this big field, again, Mayfair Airfield, but there were no lights, and it was dark, and I think weather was getting a little bad. So they actually sent out a call to all of the neighbors and said, if you have a car with headlights, please bring it to the airfield. And all of the neighbors and people lined their vehicles up, and their lights shone onto the grass landing strip so that these military pilots could land.
Wow. One of the things that's interesting to me is how much aviation was here. We think of Huntsville as being the rocket city, but with the things that you're saying, like this was an aviation town long before it was the rocket city.
That's right. Yeah, it really was. I think, obviously, and rightfully so, when von Braun arrived and the rocket age was born, and then, the aviation had probably spread to lots of other places in the country, so it wasn't necessarily as highlighted as it was with the new rocket age that von Braun ushered in.
But that infrastructure was already here.
Yes, sir. Right. Exactly.
That's very awesome. So did you ever get a pilot's license?
I did not, and to this day I wonder why not. I think I was so interested in the engineering of that it just. I don't really have a good answer why I didn't do that, because it absolutely fascinates me.
It's never too late.
I was going to say, maybe that's something I'll do next.
All right. Yeah. Well, what are you doing these days now that you've left your companies in other hands? What do you fill your days with?
Yep. Well, my wife told me, she said, you won't. Once I said I retired, she said, you won't last a month. And I lasted 3 weeks. I mean, I almost made it. I had cancer 15 years ago, and at the time I just thought, wow, it's a little, there's probably room for improvement how we treat cancer. So I'd invested in several research and development companies, found one I really liked. It uses an immunotherapy as opposed to surgery, chemo, or radiation. It uses an immunotherapy. Your body's actually very good at fighting off viruses. And so that's essentially what this company was doing, is tricking the immune system into thinking the cancer is a virus, and then it will produce a very strong immune response to go kill that cancer. Right. So started with that company in 2021, and now I'm the CEO of Diakonos Oncology, which is based in Houston. We have several FDA clinical trials going on in the United States, and then we also have a sister company in a hospital in Cancun where we can treat a lot more people. Mexico has more lenient, compassionate care, right to try, experimental medicine guidelines. And so at our hospital there, we've treated over 200 patients, 19 different cancer indications, 88% response rate. So it's been very rewarding. Yeah. I love to quote John Maxwell. He's one of my favorite authors. He wrote a little book called The Journey from Success to significance. And he defines success as adding value to yourself, whereas significance is typically adding value to something much bigger than yourself, to the greater good, to mankind. And I tell you, when life lets you do both of those things at the same time, for me, I got to jump on that. So I really meant to retire, but I'm so glad I didn't. And I think now I work more than I ever have, but it's very rewarding.
Are you cancer-free?
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but just the ability to go help people, because I just remember that was a kind of a traumatic experience for me. I certainly wasn't expecting it, and but it is just so rewarding to help these families out, and so I think we're on the path to commercializing a cure for cancer, which I'm very excited about.
Tell us a little bit about the philanthropic efforts that you're up to now.
I believe it was Winston Churchill who said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." And that's just always stuck with me. And so, I'm a big believer that, to him who much is given, much is expected, and the ability to give back to this community. Again, I was born on third base, great family, great community. I can't think of a better place to build an engineering company than Huntsville, Alabama. The infrastructure's there, and so just a way to give back. So we've done some things with I love sports, the Rocket City Trash Pandas, Toyota Field out there, the Wicks family field for our soccer MLS Next Pro team, Huntsville City Football Club, the old Joe Davis Stadium. So we were able to renovate that stadium and make it home to our soccer team. Botanical gardens, and then involved with other organizations, American
like
Heart
Space
Association, Space and Rocket Center, American Cancer Societies. So just any place that we have a way to give back, we're just happy to do that. But we've been very blessed, that's for sure.
And with all of that, you still have time to travel.
Yes, sir. Love to travel. Yeah, do a little sports car racing as well. And
wow.
Yeah, try to have that, work hard, play hard.
Yeah. It's that love of speed you were talking about.
That's exactly
earlier, right?
what it is. Yeah. Just on the ground instead of in the air right now. But maybe I need to change that.
Yeah. We always ask the same couple of questions at the end, and so I'll just hit those, and then we'll call it a wrap. The first question is, if you had a chance to go to space today, would you go?
Ooh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No hesitation there.
No. I just think that would just be an incredible experience.
Okay. Usually, so I'm surprised because it's the engineers who are hesitant because they know how it all works.
Well, true. But I tell you, I think once you develop so much confidence in the capabilities and technologies, and again, I'm a critical thinker. You have to think through all the contingencies. But once you've got something that you think's going to work, you got to go test it.
Yeah. All right. And then my last question then is, if you could give some advice to young people who might be listening, thinking about a career in engineering or aeronautics or anything like that, what sort of advice would you like to give?
Yeah, I love this question. I say three things all the time for a rewarding career. I say, do something you're good at, do something you're passionate about, and do something the market rewards. And that should not be a multiple choice. You ought to do all three of those at the same time. Do something you're good at. We all have God-given talents, and so take whatever that is and improve those. I talk to people all the time. They say, "Yeah, I'm really good at this, but I'm working on this thing over here so I can be more well-rounded." And it's like there is validity to that, but if you take something that you're already a 7 out of 10 at innately, and you work on that, and you become 9 out of 10. I mean, people stand in line to talk to 9 out of 10 versus well-rounded. May not be quite as interesting. So do something you're good at. I tell you, these days, the future belongs to the competent, not the well-intentioned. You got to be at the top of your class. So go ahead and take advantage of the things that you're already good at.
Right. And
then when it comes to passion, I've never been hit by a lightning bolt and said, you're now passionate about this. I think it comes from success, incremental achievements. And it's like, you know, and because it's always this age-old question: are you good at something because you like it, or do you like it because you're good at it? And it's like, you know, I don't know, but it's, somehow there's a connection. So do things you're passionate about, because I'll tell you, the kinds of things that we've been working on for years and years, they're hard. And if you don't have a passion for it, it would be really easy to give up. But if you've got a really strong passion, it just kind of, you know, helps you get through those tough times. And then do something the market rewards. You know, kind of keep your eye on the ball. Hey, what technologies are coming? And right now with artificial intelligence or cyber, whatever it is, just find that. And then, you know, that builds a very rewarding career. If you're doing something you're good at, something you're passionate about, and something the market rewards, you kind of got the trifecta. I'm waiting for